Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is just deeply, truly universal, and that's the profound power of shared childhood memories. Especially during uncertain times, these shared memories act like our strongest anchors. To really unpack this, we're going to look through a very specific, incredibly detailed lens today. We are going to explore a Sunday reunion in July of 1944 between two brothers, Ed and Fred. We'll see how a simple afternoon in a California backyard basically became a vital preservation of their entire shared identity.
So I really want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through this. Who is the one person in the world that remembers exactly how your childhood happened? Picture this. We're stepping into a sunny backyard in Chula Vista, California, 1944. The war is raging overseas, rationing is in full effect, but right here, in this modest little space, two brothers are about to pop open a literal time capsule of their shared past. And as you'll see, the act of remembering together here, well, it isn't just about nostalgia. It's about confirming exactly who you are.
Section 1. A Chula Vista Reunion.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's Sunday, July 16, 1944. Ed has borrowed a sedan to drive his wife Janet and their young son Peter down south to visit his brother Fred. Fred lives in this modest wartime neighborhood on Twin Oaks Avenue, built mainly for shipyard and aircraft workers. On the surface, it's a totally ordinary setting, but the stakes of this visit are quietly enormous. Ed is a direct guy. When Fred tries to downplay his home, being modest and saying, there's not much to see, Ed completely rejects that. He literally says, I want to see your life. He insists on seeing every single detail. He tours the small home that Fred's wife Betty has so carefully arranged. He checks out the front room, the kitchen, and he spends time looking at baby Randy's room, pointing out this changing table that Fred actually built entirely by hand. Ed doesn't just see a small house, right? He sees his brother's life, and to him, that is the exact opposite of small.
Eventually, the whole group settles into the backyard under a young lemon tree. Betty brings out some lemonade and ration-friendly shortbread cookies, and right in the center of the action are the two toddler cousins, Randy and Peter, hanging out on a blanket. Now, Randy has just learned to crawl, and he's moving with impressive speed. What happens next brilliantly captures this unspoken familial bond. Peter, who is almost 2 and already fully walking, voluntarily drops down to crawl right alongside his younger cousin. It's this moment of pure collegial solidarity. After doing a lap together, Peter just stands back up. Point made. Watching their boys navigate the grass like this, it instantly sparks something in the fathers, prompting them to recall their own childhood terrain.
Section 2. The Leominster Years. Just like that, the brothers transport us all from a sunny California yard straight back to Leominster, Massachusetts. This is where they grew up, right alongside this notoriously stinky brook that ran directly behind their father's cellulose comb and hairpin factory. It's fascinating how memory works, isn't it? On this Sunday afternoon, one story just effortlessly triggers the next. Talking about the brook where they used to catch frogs naturally leads into a memory about a highly questionable birdhouse they built. It was structurally unsound, honestly terrible, and it fell apart in a week. But their father proudly hung it in a tree anyway. He even acted personally offended at the wind when it finally collapsed.
What's absolutely beautiful here is how sensory these memories are. The brothers warmly talk about their mother playing Chopin on the piano to settle the house down every single night without fail. Chopin, always Chopin. Even when they were older teenagers, pretending they were far too cool to be sung to sleep, they were secretly listening. Ed literally points to his head and claims that that exact repertoire is permanently installed in his memory, note for note. It's this foundational, comforting soundtrack to their shared identity.
Section 3. Pranks, Sports, and Summers.
As the afternoon rolls on, the stories really start picking up speed. The brothers begin bantering, showing off those highly specific, hilarious contradictions that really only siblings can bring out in each other. It's like watching the original commentary track of their lives play out in real time. For instance, they had 3 older sisters, and they considered it their sacred duty to make every suitor's visit a complete nightmare. They share a massive laugh over a boy named Chester Wynn. The brothers actually rigged a water bucket over the porch door and completely soaked this poor guy in his starched clothes right in front of their parents. The punishment? 2 weeks of strict confinement to the house. But the way they tell it, it was a totally fair trade, completely worth it.
The self-deprecation just keeps coming when they bring up their time in the church choir. This was a stint completely forced upon them by their mother, the organist, who mistakenly believed that musical talent was genetic. It wasn't. Fred wore a robe that was way too short, Ed wore one that dragged on the floor, and they both openly admit they were just awful singers. So terrible, in fact, that Reverend Whitcomb strategically positioned them behind a massive pillar. He claimed it was for acoustic reasons, but the brothers both solemnly agreed today that the Reverend was absolutely just protecting the congregation's ears from their voices.
But listen, beneath all the humor, there's this immense, palpable mutual respect. When they talk about Leominster High School football, all the joking stops. Fred was a seriously talented two-way tight end. But Fred is incredibly quick to point out that he only had the room to catch those passes because Ed, who was a shorter but exceptionally wide lineman, would fiercely clear the way for him. And anchoring all of these sports memories is this quiet, powerful detail. Their father stood on the sidelines, in his coat, for every single game. He never missed a single one. The conversation naturally drifts into the warmer months, specifically focusing on their childhood summers at Wallem Lake. For them, this was the absolute pinnacle of the year. We're talking a rented cabin for a month, food bars, croquet, a giant roller coaster, and this massive rope swing hanging off an old oak tree. And of course, being teenage boys, a lot of time was spent trying, mostly with marginal success, to impress girls. Now, the sibling banter definitely peaks right about here. Fred claims this legendary status for executing a flawless backflip off that rope swing. Ed hilariously steps right in to deflate this legend, clarifying that actually, Fred landed exactly one backflip across 4 entire summers of trying. Ed then expertly pivots to remind everyone of a downright scandalous swimsuit Fred got from a Boston cousin, a suit that deeply offended a neighborhood busybody named Mrs. Aldrich. It is a literal masterclass in brotherly roasting. Ed also takes a few shots at Fred's driving advice. Fred had learned to drive first, so naturally he considered himself the foremost automotive authority. He used to lecture Ed all about double clutching on hills, a highly technical piece of advice that Ed later discovered Fred entirely made up just to sound smart. But Fred gets his revenge. He reminds the group that Ed once put the family car straight into a ditch in Connecticut and blamed the whole thing on a sudden mechanical failure. Ed freely admits he straight up lied to their dad about it. But here's the beautiful takeaway from that story. Their generous father saw right through the lie, but wisely accepted the fiction just to keep the peace.
Section 4. The Family Photograph.
So after hours of these overlapping stories, corrections, and shared laughter, the shadows in the yard start to get long. It's late afternoon now, and Ed's wife Janet pulls a small camera out of her handbag. She came with a very specific intention. She wants to capture this reunion. She poses Fred and Ed on the back steps, with toddlers Randy and Peter. At first, they're spaced a bit apart. Janet tells them to move closer together. And when they do, the brothers just instinctively close the gap. It's such a great detail. They display this deep, easy physical comfort, the kind you only get from two men who shared a bedroom for over 20 years and simply never lost the habit of standing close. The boys look up at their fathers with total, uncomplicated trust. Janet snaps the picture. Then she decides to take a second one, just for safety. In that second frame, Ed's free hand has casually come to rest on Fred's shoulder, without either of them really noticing. Janet lowers the camera and says, "That's the one." And wow, she was right. We learn that this specific photograph is destined to be framed on dressers and desks for decades, eventually preserved by a genealogist's grandson. It perfectly captured the absolute essence of their bond.
Section 5. The Weight of Memory.
As evening finally falls, Ed's family packs up the borrowed car. The exhausted toddler falls asleep against his mother's shoulder, and they begin the drive back north toward Kensington. Back in Chula Vista, the vibrant energy of the day settles into a quiet, emotional reflection for Fred and Betty out on those back steps. Fred is really struck by the immense weight of the afternoon. He turns to his wife and says, "You don't realize how much of yourself is built out of things only one other person remembers, until you're sitting with that person and it all comes back at once." Think about that. Ed is literally the only person on Earth who holds the original commentary track to Fred's history. Without Ed, the details of Chester Wynn, the Stinky Brook, that ditch in Connecticut, they might just fade away completely.
And here is the heartbreaking, absolutely crucial context underlying this entire joyful afternoon. These stories, they weren't just for fun. They were a deliberate anchor against a looming reality. Ed is deploying in August. They have known this since June. The laughter, the bantering, the careful recounting of their shared childhoods, it was all a way to firmly hold on to their identity before they are separated by the war. Fred wants to remember these weeks exactly as they were, to write them down and send them to Ed so he can hold on to them too. As the stars finally come out over Chula Vista, we are left with a really powerful realization about the people who help us hold on to ourselves. So I leave you with this final thought. Who holds the original commentary track to your life? Who carries the memories that make you exactly who you are? And have you taken the time to share those stories with them lately? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.